What's up, you guys?
What is up, everyone?
How you doing?
Pretty good, man. Just excited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Well, I'm Lemac,
I'm Carlos.
and this is SumYungGuys. I think this is not centered. How do we need? I think the table's not centered. We're not gonna cut this out. There we go. That's better. I think. Somewhat better. It's not
Okay.
completely centered. It's gonna bug some of you, but it's good enough for now.
All three of our watching.
It's fine. Most people just listen anyways.
It's okay.
It's not that much fun to watch. We're just two dudes sitting talking to a camera. Anyways, yeah. How's your week been, bro?
It's been pretty good since last time we talked. I went back to work after being off for like 2 weeks. It feels weird. The first day back, you just like, what happened? A lot changes that you don't notice when you're at work.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. But something I realized is that no one really cares truly about you.
Yeah.
I literally went back, I thought we were like, oh, dude, where you been? Nothing. He's like,
Nothing.
I was like, damn.
Yeah. I mean, everybody got their own things going on, bro.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't like crying about it or anything.
Well, yeah, of course.
I just made me realize really how, like, it is true when people say your job doesn't care about you.
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part.
Some people, they might care about you, like, oh, dude, what's up, man? Or I might hit you up, but outside of that, like, you can be gone for a month and be like, oh, you were gone?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, life goes on for pretty much everybody. And that's part of why so many people are like not paying attention to the things that go on in the mainstream and the culture, and all of that is just like everybody's just trying to survive.
Yeah.
That's it's kind of frustrating because, like, we talk about a lot of topics that are very important at a zoomed out view, like a 40,000 foot view, but like right down on the ground is where most people's problems are, and that's why they don't pay attention to all the various things that are going on in the world, like the elections, like just generally politics and things that go on in other countries and whatnot. Because, we're all just trying to survive, make ends meet, pay the bills, and care about our families and care about the things we can control.
Right.
So it can be frustrating when people don't seem to care about the things that are important or the things that you care about or whatever the case may be, just because everybody's got a different perspective too, to harken back to our last podcast was all about perspective. So yeah, most people's perspective is actually relatively small, just focused on the things that they have direct control over, as well as the things that are affecting them most immediately.
Yeah, it's true. Sadly, I've heard people say like, I care about y'all, I love y'all, but if shit goes down, I'm sorry, I gotta take care of myself because I just bought a house or something,
Of course,
and that's understandable. I get that.
That's just realistic.
And I mean, it's like, I get it. Like, back up your people, but just don't forget to take care of your own family too.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Don't get into shit for other people that aren't gonna like help you out in the long run or gonna back you up too in case shit goes down. Like, are they gonna pay your bills? Are they gonna support you?
No.
Like, do they have something planned out for a better outcome, or are they just like kind of going down the rabbit hole of this shit that you want to quit and like make a strike or whatever, blah blah blah, stand up for yourself, but not have a good result at the end? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I just kind of
Got to do your own thing.
do your own thing. Yeah.
Take care of yourself and do the best you can to take care of others when you can. But yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of taking care of others, so I listened to this podcast last week. It was Tim Pool's Culture War podcast he's got his like daily show that's like politics and current events and the news essentially. And then he's got another one that he does once a week called The Culture War, which is actually kind of very similar in a lot of ways to the type of stuff that we're talking about and trying to accomplish, is covering cultural issues. And this last week's episode was very important to me personally, just because it was all about raising children, about raising children in their biological home, so with their biological parents rather, and how children with non-biological parents or non-biological father figures, mother figures, whatever the case may be, they actually end up having less spectacular results than those that are raised in households with both biological parents, whether it's, a stepfather, stepmother, or they were adopted, or whatever the case may be, all else being equal as far as the quality of their upbringing, not being in an abusive household, that type of thing. Because you could definitely have pretty poor outcomes with your biological parents if they're abusive. But even in like if you were adopted from birth, never knew your parents, generally adopted and non-biological parent homes, the children tend to have lower outcomes, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. Like he was mentioning, lower class people, minority groups, neighborhoods, communities. A lot of people say like, "Oh, if you really try, you could make it." It's not that. It's possible, but it's just you're struggling a lot more.
Yeah, the cards are not in your favor.
Exactly. And I'm actually reading about that in this book that we have to write an essay on how and why, like what are the little things on the side that are causing this too. I'm not sure if y'all know, but a lot of like major companies and rich people put their factories in a very low income like community because no one's going to say anything. Because if they speak up or say something, no one's going to back them up. Whatever the factory is causing harm, the pollution in the air, the lead in the water, all these hazards are going into these people, which cause development issues. Fertility rates are like really low because of all the poison that's in like around them. The environment's negative. So like the way they look at things is a very dark, negative way. They feel suppressed. And, it comes into a psychological effect as well. It's not just like, oh, they're just factories, they're polluting the air, it's bad for the environment. It's not just about the environment. It's also about the effect of the environment that's causing the environment within the people as well. Like we're all connected. We're all like we need the bacteria that lives in like the world and that lives on us. And then, the environment needs us, and then we need the environment. And then what these people don't understand is that this pollution is affecting everyone in general. But they don't care because all they care is about making the money.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's where all the pesticides and the herbicides and all of that with mass production farming, where you have to clear out huge sections of land to plant this one crop, is much more detrimental to the soil. Mm-hmm. It's terrible for, I mean, even so, like they spray a bunch of pesticides on wheat, for example. And so something that happens a lot is people will travel to other countries, like Europe or wherever outside of America, eat the same foods in the same portions, and end up losing weight because they're not having negative reactions to the food that they're eating out there, even though they're eating the same foods.
Right.
And that's all because of these pesticides that get into the food that, we're using them because it helps the company save money on production and produce more food for lower prices and not worry about all the bugs and stuff that eat their crops.
Right. And it's kind of crazy because, a lot of people don't think that these pesticides or chemicals affect you in any way, but it does. It affects your mentality. It puts you depressed. It makes you brain fog. It gives you all that, like, why is it that I can't have kids? Or why is it that I feel depressed? Or why is it that I feel like I can't do anything? Why am I so negative? And it's like all the air around you, the water, all the poison they're putting into you. And then that's why, especially in like these lower class or, you know, communities with minorities, they just tend to just push all that waste over there because they know if you put it in the rich communities, they're going to complain and make a stand for it, and it has to be changed.
Yeah.
But you do it in either in a Hispanic community, which they get dealt with by getting all these pesticides and chemicals from the farming and growing in the fields, and then the black communities they get hit with, like, you know, the air pollution and then the lead in their water, and then just like they have to deal with white supremacy. You know, they're getting suppressed from, you know, like the CIA when they integrated drugs into the communities, and
Yep.
you know, they're like, oh, well, they do drugs and they do this, blah blah blah. You know, they're just keeping us suppressed, all of us. You know,
All of us. And it's not even just like minority communities, as in African American and Latin communities, but even like poor white communities,
Mhm.
especially now with the opioid epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
All the opiates, that was predominantly white families, low class white households that were affected by that. Like you get into places like Ohio, or that are areas that are poor communities but predominantly white areas. You see a lot of the same types of things. Dave Chappelle actually had a joke about it. He was talking about where is it that I think he said he lives in Wyoming, and or somewhere like that. Might have been Ohio, actually. But anyways, he's talking about how he's seeing the effects of the opioid crisis on white communities, and he was like, and it just reminds me of my people, of our people, the black community back during the crack epidemic. And I gotta say, I don't care either. That was the punchline to the joke. But that's comedy. That's stand up comedy. That's, you know, just the way that they approach those types of issues is by making light of it, because you got to make light of it to make the joke out of it. But also it raises awareness. It does raise awareness, even though he's being lighthearted about it and maybe not treating the issue with as much seriousness as it deserves. But I think also otherwise, I think the value of him making the joke about it is that he's making people more aware of it. Even though he's doing it in a joking manner, making fun of it, essentially, it's still opening people's eyes to things that they may not have had their eyes open to before. That's one of the best things about comedy, in my opinion, is
Oh yeah.
is not only being able to make light of a heavy topic,
Mhm.
but to bring awareness to a topic that otherwise might not be talked about.
Right. It's like the all truths. No, all jokes contain truth. You know?
Yes. All good jokes
Yeah.
contain some truth.
And that's true. I like that though, because I feel like that they're really pushing that nowadays. Like a lot of things is going on. They're like kind of like putting it out there. Throw a couple of jokes. People like it. They'll keep talking about it. It's kind of like a way of saying like, "Hey, this is happening."
This is an issue.
Ha ha ha, comma. What are we gonna do about it? Ha ha ha,
Yes.
comma. You know,
Yeah.
just try
Yeah.
to like be aware. And then like later on, you're like, "Oh, when he talked about that," and then you're like, "That's kind of crazy though," like because it's true.
It is. It
And then you
is.
start thinking about it, and you start kind of like you might want to do like some research. You kind of read up on it, and you kind of like, you know, but what are you gonna do about it next?
Yeah. Yeah. True.
That's the hard thing.
Yeah. But yeah, to get back to the you know, the companies just trying to make a quick buck and not really caring about the people that they're affecting in maximizing their profits. Do you know how the opioid epidemic really started?
Mm-mm.
It was basically so there's the Sackler Purdue Pharma. The Sackler family is the family that owns Purdue, and Purdue is a big pharma type company that produces painkillers essentially. And these opiates were, I mean, for a long time, I want to say this is the early 2000s to mid 2010s, where opiates like Oxycontin, Like I don't know the names of all the different opiates. Fentanyl didn't really become a thing until around 2015, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the first time I had heard of fentanyl was probably when
13.
like Mac Miller died, because I'm pretty sure that's what killed Mac Miller, right?
Fentanyl. They found fentanyl in his cocaine or weed or something like that.
He bought some drugs from some guy that probably got his drugs for cheap, and because that's pretty much how drug dealers make their money, is getting it cheap and selling it for more. And so he got his drugs for probably relatively cheap from some guy that he probably shouldn't have trusted. But also, this was right at the start of the fentanyl epidemic, and so he couldn't have had any way of knowing. But regardless, the whole opioid epidemic started because the Sackler family and Purdue were essentially giving all of these incentives to the doctors, that they were like, hey, if you push this opiate, which has no negative side effects, it's non-addictive, all of the the BS that they normally say about drugs that are addictive or that they're just trying to sell because they made a whole bunch of them already. They got approved by the FDA. And I was actually listening to another podcast today. It was Joe Rogan's podcast, actually, with this guy, Alex Berenson. And Alex Berenson, the reason he was on Joe Rogan, I think he's been on there a couple of times now, but Alex Berenson got banned from Twitter during COVID because he was speaking out against the COVID vaccine that, apparently Pfizer tested their vaccine on 10 mice or 10 rats, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like legitimately, literally 10 before it got approved, which is insane.
What was the outcome? 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10?
I honestly don't know, but like that was the extent of their testing.
That's not enough research.
No, not at all.
I think they were just desperate too. They were just desperate to get something out, and also like we're talking about the pollution, not caring about where you put those factories, even though you're making harm to the environment and people. I think that's what they were also trying to do.
Yeah,
let's give them this.
They were just trying to make a lot of money, and so they did. They made a lot of money. Russell Brand was on, I want to say, oh man, whose show was it? Some late night show, not Anderson Cooper, but a guy like that. And Russell Brand talked about all of the money that all of these different pharmaceutical companies made, and then on top of that, they made all of the money, but it was funded by taxpayers. So we paid for the vaccine, we paid for the production of the vaccine, but when it came to the profits, they kept the profits. And there were, I don't know, something like 20 new billionaires produced by vaccine production. It might have been millionaires, but regardless, that's a lot of people to become extremely wealthy off of this vaccine that turned out to be not really effective at all. At all.
Fucking 5 now?
You got to get 5 boosters just to be vaccinated, and even then, it's still not that great. Like, they tried to make another flu vaccine, essentially, and the flu vaccine, everyone gets the flu vaccine once a year. So
I just find it funny when it comes to people not understanding really what's going on. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like the whole, like, back in the day when the KGB and the U.S. were having issues, and then people were like really trusting their government because the U.S. was using like propaganda on their own people to say like, oh, you got to be careful with the Russians, so you better trust your government.
Yeah.
Have faith in us, blah, blah, blah. So everyone was like, just hands up and take everything you want, gov, just like how it is now. All these people are scared. They're like all these news medias that were saying, oh, millions of people died, blah, 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 blah. Like, I understand a lot of people died, and that's really sad, and I'm sorry about that, but they were also making some of those numbers. And every person that would come into the hospital and they showed some sign of like a sneeze or something, COVID.
Yeah, and then like, oh my goodness, the fact that, because this is also true, people, if you had COVID and you died, let's say you had COVID but you died in a car accident, they would still call that a COVID death.
Yeah, I heard about that too. And the
fact that people don't know about that is crazy. Like that should be, and that goes back to the point we were making earlier about so many people are just caught up in their day to day. They're just trying to survive. They're trying to make ends meet. They're taking care of their kids. They're just trying to get to and from work. They got the groceries, the bills, everything that's going on. I get it. Life is chaotic and hectic, and there are a lot of things to pay attention to just to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why people don't do the research to understand, because it does require a lot of time to do the research to figure out what's really going on behind the scenes. But at the same time, you owe it to yourself, to your future, to your children, to the world in a really far away sense, because not everyone is making a huge impact on the world. But I mean, one person has a much greater impact than they think. Like Joe Rogan has a huge impact on the world, and he's just one guy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so like underestimating your ability to make positive or negative change in the world is not healthy, first off, because then you could just end up going through the world ignorant, making all kinds of mistakes that affect way more people than just yourself. But at the same time, if you're aware of those things and you do your best to make the best decisions for yourself and the people around you, you can make a much better difference than you think.
Definitely. I think so too. But back to the COVID thing, I was actually reading an article about how they think possibly COVID didn't come from bats, like it did, but the way that the bats got contaminated was from a different animal, or like the way that humans got it was from a different animal, as in like the bats had coronavirus, right? And then the bats fly around or bite, this animal called, it's not an armadillo, but it looks like more like a Pokemon. It's weird, but it has like a really hard shell on the outside. Like I should just pull it up.
Interesting.
It's called like papillion or something. It's a weird name.
I know I've heard of this animal that you're talking about. But yeah, it's pretty much confirmed that it came from the lab, the Wuhan coronavirus lab, which is hilarious that everyone was denying that and saying it was a conspiracy theory that we have this coronavirus lab, a laboratory that's experimenting on and studying coronaviruses in Wuhan, China. But then when the virus gets loose in Wuhan, and we're all like, yeah, it was like that's accepted and known and agreed on that the virus came from Wuhan, China. But if you make the claim that the virus came from the lab and it was a leak, whether it was deliberate or accidental, whatever the case may be, if you make that claim, now all of a sudden you're racist against the Asians because it's racist to claim that it's their fault or whatever the case may be. Like, it's ridiculous.
Pangolin.
Yes, I've heard of those.
So, I mean, these are from China, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're from China. So apparently they use them because they have like something they can do with antibacterial experimentation where they can take its skin or like its coat and like break it down apart and create vaccines or like medications or antibodies because they're immune to like certain poisons and like toxins. And apparently, obviously they're like in areas where they eat bugs and whatnot, caves, and they're thinking that bats, attack them or fly around them, scrape up to next to them or something, and when they capture those and they take them to the lab to experiment, they eventually, push out vaccines with chemicals or like, bacteria or viral infections that those bats had within their, vaccine that they pulled out. I don't know if I'm making sense, but basically, long story short, is that who knows? Maybe they're thinking that COVID was around for quite a while, but it never made it really an effect because it would never evolve to affect humans, till eventually it did. and it started adapting to human, biology, and then that's the reason why it started affecting us so quick and rapid, because they're thinking like, oh, who knows, maybe COVID was around for 2-3 years, maybe that one time you got sick and you thought it was a flu or RSV or just like pneumonia. It might have been COVID, but we didn't have the test, we didn't have the knowledge of it yet. So now that a lot of people got affected, maybe they got like a bunch of contaminated fucking Bengalians, and they pushed out vaccines, or people traveled and they went back and forth, and eventually everyone got sick, and boom. That's what the article said. And
Interesting.
And then, like, the further it goes into the reading, until I went to the reading, it kind of talked about how even the smallest thing in this planet has a big effect on the biggest person on this planet, which is us. So, like, if something tiny changes in the ecosystem, we change too, and they can change dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, the bacteria in your gut change your cravings. For example, so a lot of the food that you may or may not crave, if you say you're addicted to sugar, you're addicted to candy, or whatever the case may be, the food that you're eating, the bacteria in your gut feed off of that also. And it's been proven that that bacteria can send signals to your brain, whether it's through your intestinal system or it interacts electrochemically with your body in some way, shape, or form. I can't remember exactly how it works. I'm not a chemist. But it does actually change what you crave. So if I experienced this myself when I stopped eating as much sugar and candy and stuff as I used to, because I used to have a huge sweet tooth, and eventually I started paying for my own dental bills, and I was like, this has to stop.
Yeah.
And so after, kicking candy to the curb for indefinitely, every now and then I'll have candy, but not nearly as much. Anyways, after doing that, I had some cravings for candy for the first month or so, but afterwards it was like cravings are just gone. Like, I'm not craving sugar nearly as much after not eating it for so long, because those bacteria that were sending signals to my brain to make me crave candy are dying off, because I'm no longer giving them what they feed off of to survive.
No, yeah, I believe you. Because, I mean, I don't really like sugar. Like, it's weird. There's times where here and there, like you said, cravings. I might get a craving, but it doesn't take much to satisfy it. Maybe just like a piece of, like, the little fun size Snicker bars. Those are always good. But when I back like in 2012, 13, when I was dieting like very, very hard, and I really eliminated a lot of sugars and processed food, and just ate like lean beef, veggies, and fruits. I took a trip to the beach, and then I stopped at a donut shop, ate a donut, instantly felt sick. Like, I went from like feeling like such a great mood, having a great time, and then went from like oh man, like, I don't feel good. I started feeling nauseous, dizzy, my stomach was in pain, and I'm like, I think I just need, I don't know, but there's
just
times,
a lot of sugar in donuts.
I think so, and like probably the fats, a lot of oil.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I gotta go to the restroom, and I went to go throw up. Sometimes you just need to throw up and you feel better. I don't know if you ever done that.
Not really.
No. Well, I went to go throw up, and I came back, and I'm like, huh. I literally feel perfect now again. Like, I threw up like a good amount, like probably the whole donut and maybe a little bit more other food that I ate. But that, I was like, huh, that was weird. And I remember I was with my dad. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel better now. He's like, oh yeah, maybe you're not used to eating that anymore, so your body just didn't want to accept it, so it just threw it out. And I was like, interesting. I'm like, did I kill the worms I have in my stomach or something? Like, because
maybe. But yeah, so I looked it up. Basically, the microbes can increase our craving for foods that they like by changing our taste buds and producing neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin to make us happy when consumed. So this goes for both beneficial and harmful bacteria. So if you're eating a lot of vegetables, there might be bacteria in your gut that crave the vitamins and minerals you get from vegetables, and they will also give you dopamine and serotonin when you eat vegetables. So it can work both against you and in your favor. So it's something good to be aware of, is that if you just stop eating those things or drinking those sodas or whatever it is that you're addicted to that is not good for you, you can stop that, replace it with something else for a month, and you're already on track to eat better and live better as a consequence.
Or you can fast.
Or you can also fast.
Really
Fasting
good.
is also good. I've been thinking about doing a 3-day just drink water type fast.
It's wild.
Which is daunting, but it's good for you. Resets your system. And the only thing is that I work a pretty labor-intensive job, and during the summer, it's even worse. So I need all the calories I can get. As you can see, I don't have much fat on my body. So there isn't a whole lot for me to pull from if I were to do something like that. But, one of these days when I have a very low-key weekend ahead of me, maybe I'll do that. Maybe just 2 days. Who knows? But 3 days is usually a good time for a fast.
I feel like for me it would be easy because in the hospital, I there's barely any time to eat. It's funny. Like, you look at the clock, it's like 3 a.m. You're like, oh, shit, I haven't eaten anything. But you're, like, high on fucking caffeine, though.
I mean, I can go a day without eating, no problem. I used to do it a lot when I was playing video games, and that's actually not a very good thing. But it's probably one thing I would do is, if I were to do that, just play video games to keep my mind off of food.
That's wild.
That's a good way for me to do it, just because like I can get sucked into a video game for hours and not get up and do anything. It's not a good thing, but if I use it for fasting, that's probably a good justification.
You can read the Bible.
I could do that too. That's actually what I would do. I'm all the way into, where is it? I just passed the Songs of Solomon. For those that don't know, I may have mentioned this before, but I started listening to the Bible at work instead of just podcasts and audiobooks. I'm in Isaiah now. But yeah, so I went through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, and now I'm in Isaiah. Man, Job was a tough book. Do you know the story of Job?
Mm-mm.
Okay, man, that one's rough.
Before you get into that, I do want to say that he put me on this too, and I've been listening to every time I go take out my dog or I'm on like the treadmill doing cardio, like I'm listening to this thing, and let me tell you, like
Did you start from Genesis to get through the whole thing?
No, I jumped in just randomly.
Okay.
And, I always feel like God talks to me in certain ways, or like, it's so funny because like there's certain things I'm thinking, or like, sometimes you get a little stressed out, and it's like the app knows you. It's like it was just weird. It says verse of the day, and it says exactly what I need to hear for the day. And I was like,
that verse of the day thing is powerful. So in this Bible app, the one that I'm using, didn't I send you the link to? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the Bible app, it has a verse of the day. So it's like, it's just your home screen, and then verse of the day, it's a widget on your phone, and it gives you one verse. Today's verse is, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted," which is,
That's the one. Yep.
It's good. It's a good one. And it's just a different verse every day. And some of them are super powerful. Some of them I'm just like, interesting. Good to know. But yeah, anyways, you were saying?
Oh, I was listening to when Jesus came down, the whole crucifixion of Jesus Christ, like that whole, it just kind of, it was good to kind of go over it because it's been a while for me. But going over that whole story and kind of like going over like what he went through, what he told his disciples and what he told everyone else that was following him and like wanting to be with him, and eventually one by one started like, leaving his side, and the ones that stuck around were his disciples at 12. And it was just crazy. I'm just like, man, this whole time, like each of these disciples kind of like paint the picture for each and one of us, like how we are in character too. Like, how many times have you like failed Jesus,
Every day.
or betrayed Jesus, or decided to choose money instead of following Jesus? You know what I'm saying? Like the whole Judas thing, he betrays him for money, and then Peter with the third rooster, like that's just wild. When he denied him 3 times,
Yeah,
that was wild.
yeah.
I was like, damn, like how many times did we deny God? And it's like, and it doesn't have to look like, do you believe in God? Or
Yeah, it doesn't have to be someone outright asking, do you believe in God? And you saying no. It could just be as simple as doing something that you know you shouldn't do, but doing it anyways.
Yeah. And I was just like, dude, I'm like, damn. I was like, thank you, God. Thank you for showing me that again, please. Like, like that was good.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting to go through it from Genesis and just listen in order, because you really get to see. The way I see it is like it's just human history, essentially, and the development of culture and society as well, because you go from Genesis, the first people are created, then, and Jordan Peterson has said this about Cain and Abel being the first real humans, because Adam and Eve were created by God. They weren't birthed. So the way he thinks about it is that Cain and Abel are actually the first humans, not Adam and Eve. But that's just a matter of perspective. They're basically human beings, but that's not the point. And then seeing sin really manifest itself with Cain and Abel. Cain killing Abel because Abel is the perfect child. His sacrifices are of the right quality to get the rewards that he wants, and Cain feels like his sacrifices are not being appreciated as they should be, and so he begins to resent his brother and then goes and kills him. And there are a lot of instances in which it's very easy to feel like your sacrifices that you're making in your life are not being appreciated, and that happens every day. Like, how many times have you really worked hard and sacrificed a lot of time and energy, maybe even money, and then it doesn't pay off the way that you want to, and you just feel resentment towards the decision itself, towards society, towards the people that you may have been involved with in whatever project it was that you were making sacrifices for. But at the end of the day, it's like, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes it just doesn't. And all you can do is keep moving on. Otherwise, you turn into, if you just dwell on those feelings of resentment and anger, you turn into Cain, where in killing Abel, he was killing his ideal. So he could not, after killing his brother, could not strive towards that ideal anymore, because the ideal is dead. He killed his ideal, and now that's a different weight that he had to bear. But then going on from the story of Cain and Abel to then we get to Noah's Ark and the flood, where we have the children of men, the angels.
Before you move on to that one, with the Cain and Abel, so correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've read that story, but didn't they both like brought a sacrifice to God, or they both brought like a gift to God, and then Abel would like go above and beyond in gifting or sacrificing for God, right? And then Cain would, like, the effort he put in, it would be like little to none,
So it wasn't necessarily that specific.
Okay.
The story of Cain and Abel is like a paragraph long.
Gotcha.
It's actually not even that long. And it's implied that Cain's sacrifices were half-hearted or half-assed, you could say. But it's not verbatim, Cain wasn't trying. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They didn't say in the Bible verbatim that, Cain just was, half-hearted sacrifices. for all we know, he was actually sacrificing and doing his best, but wasn't being rewarded because maybe God knew that he could have done more, but Cain didn't even know he could do more, kind of thing. Because there's that too. Because like, I'll just compare it to the gym, for example. Like you could think that you're really working hard, but until you get a buddy in there that also works their ass off and is motivating you, they push you to new heights that you didn't even know you were capable of. You know? So
Say about that, bro.
I'm not trying to say anything, dog. I'm just saying that sometimes you can do more than you think you can. And, you know, until you push past what you think you can do,
right,
you're not going to get the results that you want.
Mm-hmm,
you know? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the message behind Cain and Abel, as far as I could receive it. Not only is, you know, killing the ideal and killing your brother, all of those things terrible and result in a lot of bad life outcomes, to put it simply. But you don't know necessarily how much you can do, so trying to do a bit more than you think you can do, even if you fail, is better than settling for what you think you can do.
Exactly. Because, like, what is that saying that everyone always says? That if you fail, there's a thing they say, like, you know, failure is a good thing, but quitting is the worst thing you can do.
Oh, yeah. You're not, what is it? You haven't failed unless you quit. Unless you stop trying, kind of thing. And that's very true. Most businessmen, most successful people, they fail time and time and time and time and time and time and time again before they reach success even once. And if you give up after your first, second, or even third failure, then you'll always be just that, a failure, because you gave up after failing. Mm-hmm. And if you continue to fail, but you continue to get up and try again, then you're not actually a failure. Maybe you should, you know, try some new strategies. Mm-hmm. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. But you should, if you fail and you give up after that failure, then it's done. You failed and there's nothing more to it. Mm-hmm. But if you fail and then you try again, well, there's always a chance that you could be successful next time.
That's the beauty about becoming successful, because you learn all these mistakes and tricks and tips, and, you know, and then that's what a lot of people that are like rich and, you know, billionaires and millionaires, you know, they would never judge you for trying to start your own business, because they know what you're going through. They know the steps that you're taking, that they can even help you or guide you to not trip over the steps they tripped over. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Anyone else out there, all those Cains are gonna like be like, oh, you can't do that, or oh no, you're gonna fail. Like, oh dude, what are you doing? You're wasting your time, because they're not sacrificing enough to make themselves better. You know what I'm saying? And that's the jealousy. That's how I kind of saw it. That's the jealousy they have towards you.
Yeah, that's where the haters come from.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
All those Cains out there.
Cain's the biggest hater.
They're killing your vibe. They're killing your progression. You know,
it's a lot easier to hate on someone and to kill the ideal than it is to level up and put forth more to better yourself and learn from the person that's doing better than you. It's because you have to humble yourself. That's another thing, is Cain couldn't humble himself and ask himself or his brother or God what he could do better to get the outcomes that he needed. He came to the conclusion that, oh, it's God's fault, it's Abel's fault, I should just kill Abel. And so that's what a hater is. They're killing the ideal. They're killing the possibility that they could achieve the same things that you were achieving, because it's easier to do that than it is to just try and do it themselves.
That's just wild, though. Like, thinking, because my mom used to read that story to me, not all the time or anything, but like when I used to go to bed, she used to like open up the Bible and read me stories. We had like this little Bible book for kids, and then she read that story to me, and that story always stuck with me. So did the one with what is it, Sodom and Gomorrah?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
With the salt lady. I don't know why, that was always super interesting to me.
Turned into a pillar of salt when she looked back at the town as it crumbled.
It's wild. But I think that's what kind of made me what made my belief in God today is because that was integrated into me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it grew my faith in God. You know, ever since I was a kid, I was always afraid. And of God, you know, it says fear of the Lord.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily like I'm scared. No, it's more like as in like, damn, I shouldn't really do that. It's like when you're scared of a parent, like when your dad says or your mom says, don't do this, and the house better be clean when I get back home.
It's fearing the consequences of going against God's will.
Exactly.
That's what the fear is. Because God's will is for you to do well in life and to receive his love. That's what God wants for all of us, is to make the choices that make it so that we can get into heaven and receive God's love. And fearing the consequences of not achieving that is what the beginning of wisdom is. Because if you really get into the Bible and start reading about the laws, that's where you get into Judges and Chronicles, Kings, all of those different stories. Because you go from Genesis then to Exodus, and the story of the Ten Commandments. If you really look at it, even from a secular perspective, not even believing in God, what brought about the Ten Commandments is the fact that Moses was leading the Jews, the Israelites, through the desert for 40 years. And in that 40 years, he was being a judge of all of their actions, essentially. So, like, if anyone had a problem with another person, say Carlos and I had beef because I did him wrong in some way, shape, or form, they would go to Moses, and Moses would be the one figuring out and praying to God and talking to God and figuring out how to solve the issue before him right then and there. And then it was after 40 years of doing this, and along the way he gets help from his different family members and other elders in their group. They ended up dividing up the group into levels, the hierarchy of who's in command, with, you know, people being in command of 10s, people being in command of 50s to 100s to 500s to thousands. That was where you first start to see the structure of society being formed, is in that 40 years in the desert. And then you get into Judges, where they have judges over people, not kings. No, it's a lot more like a loose community of people following God's will, and then you'd have a judge at the top of maybe 1,000 people that would determine how things should be run. And then eventually the people asked for a king, they got kings, and then that's where you start to get into the stories of David and Goliath, King Solomon, King Saul, who was before David actually. Saul was the king before David, the king when David beat Goliath, and then there was a whole falling out between Saul and David because everyone was like praising the accomplishments of Saul, which is actually, it gets back to that story of David defeating Goliath. The people were praising David more than they were praising Saul, who was the king. Saul gets jealous of David because David is serving God more perfectly. It's exactly the same story as Cain and Abel. Because David was the ideal. Mm-hmm. David was able in this situation, and Saul tried to have David killed multiple times.
I remember that.
And then another thing that's crazy is you get down into when David eventually becomes king, and he's walking on the top of the temple of the castle, and he sees a beautiful woman bathing, and he asks one of his, guys, he's like, "Who is that woman?" And he was like, "Oh, that's the wife of one of your commanders." I can't remember the names. I think her name was Bathsheba, if I remember correctly.
I don't know.
I can't remember. But anyway, I actually posted about it on my story recently. It was a meme. It was a pretty good one. You saw that?
Yeah, I saw that.
But yeah, so he ends up sending this commander to the front lines and telling his other generals to, go to the front lines with this commander. And then once you guys are in the thick of battle, everyone ditch him so that he can die at the hands of the enemy so I can take his wife. And actually, before he even did that, he slept with her and got her pregnant. So even King David, who was, perfect, essentially, a perfect, king, a perfect child of God, until he became king and got that power, ended up falling from grace. And eventually God calls him out for it, and he repents and feels terrible for it because he knows exactly what he did. But yeah, that story is amazing to me. And just all the different ways that it parallels to even today's society, where, because throughout going from Exodus to Judges to Kings to Chronicles, it's just the story of all of these kingdoms and kings that rise and fall, and they follow God, and then they worship false idols, and then they get smacked down because they were worshiping false idols, and then someone comes along and they return to the God of their fathers, and then the cycle repeats.
This is why God sacrificed his own son, Jesus Christ, because
there were a lot of animal sacrifices back then.
We just don't listen.
We just don't listen. We just do not listen.
Like, there's a Bible
Such
verse.
Is life.
For
Such
real.
is life.
For real. That Bible verse that in the Bible, I'm not sure what book it's from, but where it says how God kind of regrets creating humanity.
I can't remember where that one is either. I feel like I've gotten there.
I feel like you have, because it was one of the earlier books too.
I will say that in listening to the Bible at work, I do miss a lot because, I'm working. So like I'll get sidetracked. Someone will talk to me. I'll be thinking about something that I just heard for like 10 minutes before realizing, oh, I'm listening to the Bible, and then I missed the last 10 minutes. So I'm going to go through multiple times before I really claim to know the Word of God well. But yeah.
Genesis 6:6.
Oh, that was when the children, so the angels come down and mate with human women and create the giants. That's what Goliath was. He was one of the giants, the Nephilim. And then God, that's what brings on the flood, is because he created man, he created angels. There's the flood, and the angels that went down and mated with humans, those end up getting struck down into hell to become demons. So it was a third of the angels were struck down into hell to become demons.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Where the wickedness of man is so great that God repents of having made him.
Yeah. And then Noah was the only one that was actually solid. So he let him, have the knowledge that the flood was coming so he could make the ark and save some of humanity, which is also a very interesting story because there are so many different cultures and religions that also have a very, very, very similar retelling of the same flood, which tells me there was an actual flood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of geological evidence that's coming out recently that implies that there was actually a flood of that sort, 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, which lines up with the timing of Genesis.
How long did that flood last,
It was 40 days and 40 nights.
Right. In case no one knew.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why a lot of places, it seems like, how like, a lot of people think either like the Mojave Desert used to be full of water?
Yeah. And I mean, like the climate of Earth has always been ever changing. The climate, Earth's climate has never been stable, completely stable. That's why like a lot of the climate activists and the climate change deniers, both sides have a good point. Yeah, we probably are changing the climate to some degree with our own creations, but at the same time, the Earth's climate is always changing. So to make a big deal about it right now because we're here is, how much are we really responsible for it? It's not very easy to tell because the climate's always changing, and sometimes it changes fast, sometimes it changes slow. We just don't know. Are we actually making an effect? Probably. But how big is that effect, and how much can we actually do to mitigate our effect? Probably not all that much. It's very interesting. But yeah, we're already almost an hour in.
We are an hour in, aren't we? About 5 minutes off.
5 minutes off. But this has gone by very quickly.
It is going really quickly.
But yeah, so like seeing from the beginning of the Bible and seeing the stories unfold in order, because I've never read it in order. It's always been jumped around because when I was in elementary school, I would read the Bible with my mom. So I was living about 20, 30 minutes away from school because my mom had gotten married and so we moved, but I stayed at the same school for the rest of that year. And for that few months or however long it was that I was driving down every morning to go to elementary school, my mom had me reading out of the Bible and like explaining. We would talk about whatever we would read, and she would always pick. I can't remember half the things that we ended up talking about, but I do remember that, and that was a very, very core experience to building my faith and understanding the Bible and just understanding the world a lot better. You definitely want to get your kids into understanding the world as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
As early as possible.
Don't be afraid to show them what's really out there. I mean, yeah,
And there are definitely things that you want to keep them away from that maybe they're a little too young to understand. Like,
I think once you're in middle school, you should really like press on that pedal.
Yeah,
because that's when I started like looking up, going down the rabbit hole, the whole Matrix thing, the whole government thing, the whole Bible thing.
Oh man, yeah.
I mean, I went deep.
Yeah, and kids are getting exposed to innocence stealing influences earlier and earlier. So, I mean, like middle school boys are finding pornography, and if you can get them indoctrinated into other things that are better for them, like faith, that would probably be better than letting them just find pornography or whatever else their friends are into, because that's not good. You don't want that. You don't want that at all.
Not good.
It's very sad.
There's one more thing I was going to say. Damn, I forgot. It was good.
Yeah. What was I talking about that made you think of it?
Yeah, whatever.
What were we talking about that made you think of it?
No.
About indoctrinating kids?
No.
Because the way I see it is like kids are getting indoctrinated in one way, shape, or form. And as a parent, you want to be the one controlling what that indoctrination is, whether it's, things of worldliness, like making money for money's sake and being successful so you can have all the possessions you want to have and all the women you might want to have, or things that are a bit more philosophical at the very least, if not faith-based. I would recommend the faith-based approach because you'll end up having a happier life overall, in my opinion. Because, I mean, how many billionaires and millionaires are really, really, really depressed? Because there are a lot of them. There are a lot of people with so much money that still take their own lives. And it's really sad. It's really sad. It calls into question, actually, Ecclesiastes talks about this a little bit. I think the book of Ecclesiastes is very hopeful in a lot of ways because it's a little depressing in that it says we all die anyway, so what's the point? That's kind of what it says. But it also says because we all end up in the same place, take care of the things that really matter. And the things that really matter are not, because the richest man in the world and the poorest man in the world both end up in the ground. So do the things that matter. Take care of the people that you love. Obviously, money can help you solve a lot of problems, so there's nothing wrong with pursuing wealth. But at the same time, don't let the pursuit of wealth overcome you.
Mm-hmm. Don't let the greed consume you.
Yeah. And I think
that's good.
That's a good spot. It's a good spot to leave off.
Yeah. Before you hit that button, so you're leaving, right?
Yeah, I'm going down to Vegas for a marketing and branding conference.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I hope so.
Let me know how that goes.
I will.
And I'll be leaving too. I won't be back till October. So I'll be gone for a
little
little
bit. Yeah, you're going to be gone for, what, a week and a half, 2 weeks?
12 days.
12 days. Yeah. Cool.
A week and a half, yeah.
Just over a week and a half. Nice.
Yeah.
Going to come back with a lot of stories from Europe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I can't wait. I'm really excited for the food. You know how people say, like, the food tastes different and is a lot better? So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to learn about different cultures from different, countries. You know, Paris, Germany, Switzerland, London. I feel like London, can't really say much because I've really never been there. But what a lot of people tell me is like, oh, it's kind of like the U.S. It's been Americanized. And I'm like, I hope that's not true.
A lot of the world has been Americanized.
Unfortunately.
It is what it is.
But yeah, I'm excited to learn a lot. Go through a lot of museums. Look at the structure of different buildings and different environments, out there. It's gonna be really exciting.
Nice.
My lady's a little scared for some reason. she's like, what if you fall in love with like a German chick? And I was like, shit, I don't know.
Just bring her back.
Yeah, I'll bring her back.
Have 2 wives.
We're Mormons now. No, but I'm just excited. Hopefully they don't do like a mandate or like a lockdown, random lockdown.
Suck.
I mean, not the worst thing that can happen in Europe.
I mean, if you're visiting, you'll probably be able to get back in the country. You're an American citizen, so right?
Yeah.
What the fuck? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You love to see it. You love to see it. You gotta mess with your friends sometimes.
That was a good one. You should hear Adam at work.
Yeah, no, I believe it. He yeah, racist jokes are funny sometimes if they're done well and with your friends, not with random people. It's a good way to get punched in the mouth.
Funniest thing ever. I forgot who said something, but at work, someone was saying like, "Oh, do you know any good landscapers?" And then I don't know who it was, but someone said, "It's like, well, if you wait about 30 minutes, Carlos will be here." You can buy asking. I was like, "Fuck you guys."
Oh, that's good. That's a good one.
Oh man, I'm like, it's true. How much are you charging?
Oh man, that's good. All right, guys. Well, it has been Some Young Guys. I'm Lemac.
I'm Carlos.
We are just trying to solve the world's problems in a podcast.
That's right.
Peace.